When a synagogue hires a former filmmaker as its rabbi, then the synagogue should count on at least one high holiday sermon inspired by a film that year. As recently as 2 months ago, I was considering the films I've seen this past year and could not decide which message to highlight. I had given up on finding one specific movie. And then I saw a film roughly 6 weeks ago, a month ago, and I knew within the first 5 minutes in the theater that it deserved space in our service today. Not because it was made by a master filmmaker, even though it was, not because it contained acting of the highest order, even though it did, not because the effects were so understated that they were almost impossible to recognize, although they were, but rather the film deserved to be mentioned because its message, in and of itself, is such powerful Torah. The film was Sully. Sully tells the story of Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, a pilot who landed a U.S. Airways flight on New York's Hudson River on January 15, 2009. The film focuses on the days that follow the crash, and the story juxtaposes Sully's praise and glorification in the media with his scrutiny and investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, otherwise known as the NTSB. For those of you who have not yet seen the film, there is no risk that I will ruin the ending for you. We all know what happened. We know that on January 15th, 2009, U.S. Airways Flight 1549 departed from LaGuardia Airport in New York and immediately was hit by bird strikes and lost power in both engines. With seemingly no other options available, Sully forced landed the plane in the middle of the Hudson River and saved all 155 lives on board the plane that day. There is a famous Jewish story about Shmulik, a man whose city is flooding. A police officer knocks on his door and tells him it's time to evacuate your house. Shmulik responds, "God will save me." Later that day, the rain intensifies. The water has risen. Shmulik climbs onto the roof of his house, and a fire department boat paddles by in the water and calls out to him, "Jump off the roof and into our boat." Shmulik refuses and tells the firefighter, "God will save me." Later, Shmulik is floating in the water as a National Guard helicopter spots him. The rescuer is lowered down to grab him and says, "Grab my hand and I'll pull you out of the water." Shmulik doesn't exert any energy at all. And he just says, "God will save me." Sure enough, Shmulik drowns. When Shmulik reaches heaven, he finds himself standing before the Kadosh Baruch Hu, God himself, or herself. And Shmulik asks God, "Why didn't you save me?" God smiles and says, "I sent you 3 messengers in the form of a police officer and a firefighter and a National Guardsman. You did not want to be saved." There is no greater Torah than this to define the 20th century. Self-reliance became a virtue after we found our peoplehood almost burned to ash in Europe. God did not sever the railroad tracks leading to Auschwitz. Zionism was born. And unlike Shmulik, the Jewish people picked themselves up and fought for a Jewish state, and we won it. Now, in 2016, self-reliance is not a new concept. None of us lives our lives as Shmulik, with absolute faith and nothing else. None of us walk through the world expecting God to solve all of our problems for us. As is shown in the movie Sully, we see miracles in this world through the action of people like Captain Sullenberger, through the actions of the New York Police Department and New York Fire Department, and through the actions of all of the rescue workers in the film. Just like in the story of Shmulik, we see noble actions. We see godliness in the world expressed through civil servants whose professional responsibility it is to perform these tasks. New? So what about us? What about people who have not dedicated themselves to saving lives or received professional training to run into the burning buildings? That is what the Torah is for. Meaning to say, the Torah gives us the means to bring godliness into the world. Torah trains us and instructs us. The Torah gives us the moral and spiritual training to be compassionate, to be generous, to be understanding, to be empathetic, because it's not natural, it's not innate. Most of us are not born with the instinct to rush out and care for our fellow. Today, on this day of Yom Kippur, when we know we could do better, let's not only think of ourselves. Let's think about our neighbors and the community that immediately surrounds us. Let's remember that just last week, we celebrated the birth of the world. In that wonderful creation narrative, Adam, the first being, is created into the Garden of Eden, a place where everything is new and clean and fresh and in abundance. And there was still a problem. Vayomer Adonai Elohim, lo tov heyot ha'adam livado. And God said, it's not good for man to be alone. In this world, no man is an island, not even when he or she is literally the only person on earth. It doesn't work. We need others to love. We need others to care for. Our parents, spouse, siblings, children, friends. I trust that's the sermon that you've heard many times before. But now it's time for this one. We have to care for strangers like we do for our own loved ones. We need to empathize more as professional compassionates. This election season has wounded this great country in a terrible, terrible way. We've allowed politicians of all kinds to lead us down a path where vast groups of people in this country are smeared and called murderers or called deplorables. We hear racial epithets or mockery based on the state, on the region in which we live. The New York Times Online last week, for the first time ever, had to use 4-letter curse words and vulgarity on its homepage in order to properly report on the political debate. Friends, in the last 2 years, I've traveled a great deal across this great country. I visited Arizona, Texas, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Connecticut, and Illinois to screen my film, Roadmap Genesis. And I have to tell you, I'm always overwhelmed by the grace and hospitality and decency of the Jewish and Christian communities that I have visited. Everybody in this country, whether you're from California or Georgia, black or white, Jewish or Christian, we all want a better future for our kids. I have found that in local communities, in personal conversations with leaders, the gap in issues is never as wide as pollsters would like you to believe. Today, with all the advances in technology and social media, we're more cut off from people than ever before in the history of the world. I don't ever have to watch news I don't agree with. I don't ever have to hear music I don't enjoy. I don't ever have to meet people that aren't like me. But you know what? We should. We should reach out and get to know our neighbors. We should reach out and help our neighbors. In the movie Sully, every single person that was shown helping was professionally trained to act. In the story about Shmulik, every one of God's messengers were professionally trained to act. But we should expect every single person in society to be a professional compassionate. Because to be compassionate all of the time, to care about others around you, that's the highest form of human being. The famous Rabbi Hillel in the Mishnah said, Im ein ani li mili, uchshe'ani le'atzmi ma'ani, ve'im lo achshav ematai. Hillel began by asking, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? That is the self-reliance we know. That's the first step. Congratulations. Most of us have mastered being for ourselves. He goes on to ask, and if I am only for myself, what am I? If you are only for yourself, if you are not compassionate, you're not at all empathetic, then you're selfish. Then you live in a child state. You are, dare I say it, unevolved. Friends, I'm asking of us today to concern ourselves about becoming professionally compassionate as much as we are professionally accomplished at our other profession. I dream of the day that we read the news and say, we should really help clothe those complete strangers that we don't know. Because we're not only for ourselves, we are professional compassionates. We should really help feed those children that live so far away, or perhaps that even live in our own backyard, because we are professionals. We are professional compassionates. We're not going to just walk past that bum in front of Coffee Bean any longer. We're going to offer to buy him or her a coffee or something to eat while we're inside, because we are professional compassionates. I know it's possible because of Hillel's last question. If not now, when? When is a better time to bring more light, more compassion, more caring into the world? There's no better time. Today, on the day when we try to atone and enact the better version of ourselves, the only better time is now. When is a better time to love and to hug and to help heal? The better time is now. I know it's possible. We all know it's possible. Because we've seen when the world turns dark, that people turn into professional compassionates. On September 11th, 2001, life stopped in New York, and people just cared about one another. Wonderful people, most of whom had never met one another before, simply helped each other because they were neighbors in need. But we don't have to wait for a catastrophe. We don't have to wait for terrorism or plane crashes. We just have to open our eyes to the world that stands immediately before us. And so over the upcoming year, of 5777, we will be having different opportunities here at Adat Shalom for all of us to begin our careers as professional compassionates. A food drive around Thanksgiving, a toy drive around Hanukkah, ways to become more environmentally conscious, ways to reach across racial divides here in Los Angeles, ways to care for our Jewish brothers and sisters all across the world, and in particular in the state of Israel. And every time one of these programs arise, I promise you that you'll have a million other things to do that day on your calendar. For me, it's often kids' birthday parties or play dates in the park. So we have to ask ourselves, would I let this birthday party or this play date interfere with my professional work? Would I take time away from my job for this birthday party? I know my child would rather go to dance or swimming or whatever it might be. But do I want to set an example for them and teach them the value of caring for others? Because after today, we are no longer only lawyers and teachers and real estate brokers and rabbis. We are also professional compassionates. And it has to begin today. People will look at this community, Adat Shalom, literally meaning a community of peace. And they will understand that we bring shalom, shleimut. We take a shattered world and we make it whole. We see the flaw and we try to understand and we try to enact help. We believe in a Torah of action, of commandedness, because we were never Shmulik, but we didn't think we could ever be Sully. We can be Sully. The Talmud teaches us that to save a life is to save the world. Each and every time we see a problem, a struggle, it's our opportunity to help save the world. And today, as the world stands in judgment, could there be a greater imperative for all of us than to help heal what we see outside? For most of us, it won't be a monumental task. We pass dozens of people every day who need saving. People who need emotional Ubers, spiritual loans, cosmic hugs. It's true. It's true. It's not good for man to be alone. We need help. Let this community be the helpers. Don't wait for Sully to help. It's our job, both as people and as Jews. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we all be sealed for a year of goodness.